Hello and welcome to a Week 8 edition of the Established to Run Rest of Season Top 150 Rankings Show. My name is Adam Levitan. Each and every Wednesday, we are here to discuss, yes, that's right, our Rest of Season Top 150 rankings, how those play into the season-long trade market, our redraft trade calculator, buy lows, sell highs, and more. Be sure to stay tuned to the end. We'll cover your listener questions and submit our one move to make. For this today, I'm joined by two members of our projections team, Mark Dankenbring and Jack Miller, as well as the season-long bro you know and love, John Daigle. Mark, how's it going today?
That's good. We had exciting news this morning that DeAndre Hopkins was traded to the Chiefs, so that shook up our rankings already this week, and just excited to talk about the fallout here with you guys. Certainly an exciting move, and excited to talk through it today.
Daigle was adamant. He told me, Adam, stop talking about these trades. NFL trades don't happen. They never happen. Big name trades never happen. The NFL decided to shove it right down Daigle's throat. Daigle, how's it going today?
Points, trades. I don't know what the hell this league is.
Jack, how's it going today, buddy?
It's going well. We've got the NBA starting and the NFL turning into the NBA with all these trades lately. But happy to be here.
Yeah, I actually think it's good. Like the NFL teams are realizing that there's just no reason to hold players, veteran players who probably aren't going to be on your team next year anyways. You might as well get assets for them. Just seems like, team building 101, but what do I know? Okay. First, I know everyone has trade questions specific to you. That is why we developed our redraft trade calculator. If you have Draft Kit Pro, which is $50 a year, you have access to our redraft trade calculator and our dynasty trade calculator. Simply put in a trade and we'll tell you which side we think is favored. Second, if you follow ETR, you know how much we care about making accurate player projections. Our entire business revolves around our ability to predict what's going to happen on the field. This year, we've really upgraded our projections process behind the scenes, thanks in part to working with Sports Info Solutions. If you need data for your business, for the NFL or other leagues, SIS has great options. Be sure to check them out at sportsinfosolutions.com. And lastly, weekly snake draft action is really heavy on Underdog right now. We have ranks for that format as part of our in-season product. Head to underdogfantasy.com to check out their Battle Royale $5 buy-in snake draft tournament each week. All right. Let's get into it here with the rest of season top 150. I think the question on everyone's mind, Mark, is where should they be valuing DeAndre Hopkins? This is a 32-year-old wide receiver who has been dealing with injuries for this entire season and dealing with Will Levis woes, of course. Now he goes to a Chiefs team, which doesn't have Marquise Brown, doesn't have Rashee Rice, won't have Juju Smith-Schuster, at least this week, if not longer. Mark, we are up to 57 overall on DeAndre Hopkins in the rankings. Now, how do you think about him rest of season?
It's obviously a better situation than he had playing with Will Levis and the Titans, but I do think we're probably going to be a little below where the public market may have Hopkins pegged, at least initially. Kind of when I think about his move to Kansas City and what it means for his fantasy outlook, we've seen kind of that the Chiefs just haven't really filled many players with too many targets other than Rashee Rice in the past couple of years under Patrick Mahomes and in this Andy Reid offense. So, just doing projections initially, I think Hopkins is probably going to come in around the 20% range because obviously you still have Travis Kelce there. You have Xavier Worthy, who had over a 30% target share this past week, didn't turn into too many fantasy points for us, but he at least got the targets this past week. And then we've also seen the Chiefs lean in heavily to the run as well, with Kareem Hunt playing well in Kansas City as well. So I think Hopkins here is probably looking like he'll get maybe 6, 7, 8 targets per game, which is obviously good coming in from Patrick Mahomes. But I think he is squarely in kind of the low end wide receiver 2, high end wide receiver 3 range. Ultimately, I think it's going to come down to if he gets the looks in the red zone. I'm a little worried about his explosiveness at this stage of his career, especially with the offseason MCL injury. And then he also left this past game with some Achilles and calf soreness. So not sure how much that will affect him in Kansas City. It could be a Devonta situation where he miraculously is a lot healthier in a new situation. So yeah, I think it's good for Hopkins. It's certainly a downgrade for both Worthy and Travis Kelce as well, just given that more targets are going to go to Hopkins rather than those two. And then we also dropped Juju Smith-Schuster out of the top 150 after his hamstring injury, and don't think he'll be much of a factor down the stretch.
Yeah, just on Hopkins specifically. So I actually thought he was pretty good last year. Coming into the season before Hopkins got hurt, we had Hopkins ahead of Calvin Ridley in our rankings before the season, and that was way against market. I mean, everybody had Calvin Ridley like 20 spots ahead of DeAndre Hopkins, but data was pretty clear. Hopkins was a better wide receiver in 2023 than Calvin Ridley was. And really, Hopkins, for much of his career, has been better than Calvin Ridley. So he's 32 years old now. I still think he can play. I agree with Mark. Maybe this injury stuff was, what's the point of going out there with Will Levis even at this point? So I'm excited about it. My concern is that people are like, oh, he's going to play the Rashee Rice role. Rashee Rice was so explosive after the catch. That is not what you're going to get from DeAndre Hopkins. A huge part of Rashee Rice's value to me was, hey, you catch the ball 5 yards against a linebacker and go run for 30. That's not DeAndre Hopkins' game. So I'm not that overly excited about DeAndre Hopkins. I like where we have his rank here at wide receiver 29 overall rest of season. Daigle, we did not get to talk about this on the waivers show yesterday. We are being bombarded with questions. Would you drop Xavier Worthy for DeAndre Hopkins and et cetera, other moves like that? Would you add, if DeAndre Hopkins was on your waiver wire, would you blow your entire fab budget on DeAndre Hopkins? And questions along those lines for the waivers people out there, which run on Wednesday. How are you thinking about this?
And Hopkins was someone that we are trying to put our finger on the pulse of, just in case, since he was listed by me on the drop list initially, because you can't start him or anyone with the Titans for that matter. Right now, for instance, Hopkins was the wide receiver 78 in points per game. Calvin Ridley's the wide receiver 71 in points per game. So even a boost for him without Hopkins is a very negligent boost based on who they have under center. For Hopkins, I think what really happens is you just drown out any hope you may have had for Juju Smith-Schuster. It was already a punt to try and get there with him, but now that's the role that he drowns out. I think it's Hopkins, Kelce for that offense, and I still prefer Worthy to Hopkins personally. Hopkins offers the higher floor, but I still have a little bit of hope in this season high target share, 32%, plus the carry they gave Worthy out of the bye. Still someone I want to bet on, especially as an over-the-top threat, whereas Hopkins, we think now soaks up that volume closer to the line of scrimmage.
I don't want to drop Worthy at all, like in case it comes around, but he does not look like an NFL receiver right now. I know he was so close to that huge play. I would prefer Hopkins to Worthy personally, but I don't want to drop Worthy. I mean, we still have him 82nd overall in the rest of the season, top 150 ranks here. So yeah. Oh, we also got some questions, Daigle. Tennessee side. Is there any interest for you in any of these Tennessee guys? I don't think it matters very much. It's not like DeAndre Hopkins was playing a ton anyways. We're going to have the Mason Rudolph show here for a little bit, at least going forward. Any Tennessee guys, maybe for deep leaguers, interest you, Daigle?
Treylon Burks, if you want to get a little crazy. I think the only one who actually could provide startable value is Chigokonkwo. Maybe this helps him out a little bit. But again, you can't even play Ridley and Hopkins right now. So I don't want to go to the next guy who just replaces Hopkins.
Yeah, agreed. Okay.
Not to burst the bubble, but Treylon Burks is on IR. He got injured in practice last week.
Yeah, I mean, what a mess.
The Week 7 massacre.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you think, Jack, on the KC stuff, just to wrap it up here, we have dropped Worthy, as we mentioned, 17 spots, Kelce down 27 spots. I think that people, well, I don't know. I mean, not only did Kelce underperform in that game against San Francisco and Noah Gray looked really good, but also now we get DeAndre Hopkins there. So yeah, Jack, I guess, how are you thinking about Kelce specifically going forward here?
I think it's really bad news for Kelce personally. He's averaging 8.8 yards per reception. That is the lowest of his career by almost 2 yards, and that's 4 yards below his career average. He's only averaging 6.8 yards per target. He's 35 years old. I kind of think at this point that either he's lost a step or they're just saving all the downfield Kelce stuff for the playoffs. But regardless, he's not going to get downfield in the regular season at this point. So he's completely dependent on volume, and DeAndre Hopkins is going to come in and take a good chunk of that volume. So, I mean, with the state of the tight end position, Kelce's still a good fantasy tight end. But if it was Kelce as the number one option here, unquestioned without Rashee Rice, we're talking about him in the tier below Brock Bowers. I think now he's closer to the other guys like Jake Ferguson, like Njoku if Winston plays. like McBride instead of the clear tight end 2.
Yeah, I mean, we're down to tight end 6 on Kelsey right now. I mean, I was excited about him when Rashee Rice went down. Not excited like because I had him. I have none of him, but I thought that he would see a nice boost. The Noah Gray stuff down the field, screens to Noah Gray certainly is not great for Travis Kelsey if they're not going to try to force feed him stuff, even without Rashee Rice or DeAndre Hopkins out there. All right. Let's move on to some other stuff here. Mark, Joe Mixon has been outrageously explosive this year. I actually did not really think that this was in Joe Mixon's bag. These huge runs, 50-yard runs, 30-yard runs, 30-yard catches. At this point, we're up to 15th overall on Joe Mixon. I'm not sure there's any moves that people can really make here unless they want to sell Joe Mixon now. What do you think about him rest of the season? And by the way, I have not seen any updates on Nico Collins, but we are nearing the end of that 4-week window where Nico Collins is definitely out.
Yeah, I think Joe Mixon has just solidified himself as deserving to be in this, second tier of fantasy running backs. In his 2 healthy games so far this year, he has 60 touches combined, which is wild. In the other 2 games, he's played fewer than 50% of the snaps. That was the game he suffered the high ankle sprain, and then his first game back against New England, even though he had a great fantasy game, he still didn't play all that much. So the workload here is just out of control. And we know that Bobby Slowick in this Houston offense wants to run first, despite having CJ Stroud in an explosive passing game. So I think Mixon's just locked in here. And yeah, he's more of a hold at this point. Given how depleted the wide receiver position has gotten, I do think, maybe you could get a haul for Joe Mixon at this point if you need to replenish some of your wide receiver depth there. But yeah, his role is just outstanding. And I think, there was some skepticism on how he would translate to Houston, but it's certainly been wheels up for him, and he's a clear locked in RB1 the rest of the way.
God, I didn't realize that Nico can't be back until week 10. I thought it was week 9, and now I'm just like even more depressed than I was before. But yeah, I think Nico coming back actually won't be bad for Mixon. They need to move the ball more efficiently. I mean, CJ Stroud threw for 90-something yards in that game on Sunday. I don't think that's a good thing for Mixon if the passing offense is broken, and getting Nico back will be huge for that for sure. Daigle, let's go to the DK Metcalf situation. I'm not sure how long he's going to be out. I was reading he's going to try to play this week, or he wants to play this week. I also saw some speculation that he could sit out through the Seahawks week 10 bye. I think people have concerns, and probably rightfully, that JSN is not capable of stepping up and doing what DK Metcalf can do. Obviously, he won't be doing it deep down the field, but I think there's significant worry about JSN out there right now, even though I think he gets a pretty big bump here if Metcalf does indeed miss. Daigle, what do you think about Seahawks pass catcher stuff? Let's assume that Metcalf is out for a bit.
Just an 8.4 yard depth of target for JSN so far, compared to 11.5 for even Tyler Lockett. We did see one game last year where DK Metcalf missed. It was Jake Bobo who popped up for 61 yards and a touchdown. But I think the overall structure of the Seahawks, even without Metcalf, stays the same. I don't think they altered their game plan to be a top 5 offense in both pass rate and PROE. And so, although, yes, does it limit the ceiling of the Seattle passing game? Probably. But still, it's even you go to the short term against the Bills, which is a pretty good spot given what the Bills have been leaking in their secondary over the last month to opposing quarterbacks. So I have a little more faith for JSN and Lockett. The thing is, you just have to close your eyes and cross your fingers with JSN because we don't know. We're hoping he gets put into a role that he hasn't been used at either under Shane Waldron or Grubb to date. We're hoping they open up the target tree, but we just don't know.
Yeah, well, that's I think that's a great point. 2 regimes now have said this is how we want to use JSN. Not just this idiot Shane Waldron. The new regime came in and said this is how we want to use JSN. So I actually think it's a bigger bump for Lockett and Bobo than for JSN. But yeah, JSN needs volume to hit because he's getting targeted so close to the line of scrimmage. So more volume certainly can't be a bad thing. We're up to 62 overall here on JSN. Let's go to the CMC news. Jack, I know we've talked about this a lot. I mean, it sounds like CMC is going to try to return in week 10. My general take is they will ease him in. Big workloads off this stuff is not going to be a good idea still. He could be so incredibly efficient on, say, 12, 13, 15 touches. We have him 31 overall. Now, there's a wide range of outcomes because what I said about limited when he first gets back, if he's not limited in the fantasy playoffs, I mean, it's just a stone cold nuts, right? So what do you think, Jack, right now about handling Christian McCaffrey?
Yeah, if I had a winning team, I would definitely be going out and trying to get McCaffrey. I think it's pretty meaningful that the 49ers are 3-4. And if you look at their schedule the rest of the way, it's really hard. Like at this point, they're not a playoff lock. Like they really don't have a single like 100% win the whole rest of the way. So I don't think they're going to have the luxury of limiting McCaffrey and giving Jordan Mason a ton of work and keeping McCaffrey ready for the playoffs. So if I'm 6-1 or something in fantasy, I would be valuing McCaffrey probably as a top 15 to 18 player. We have him at 31 because it's just so dependent on your current team status.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think if he can like ramp into a 18 touch role by week 14 or week 15, I want to be trading for him. There is absolutely no way anyone is going to know. I don't even think the 49ers know right now if he's going to be able to do that. So that's what's going to make that a really, really hard spot. But like Jack said, those are a gamble that I think is willing to make. All right, Mark, let's go to the Tampa stuff. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this. You know, we've talked about it. Daigle and I talked about it. Silva and I talked about it. The only wide receiver that we have on the Bucs in the top 150 here is Jalen McMillan. Obviously, we have Mike Evans, but Jalen McMillan here at 143 overall. No Sterling Shepard, no Trey Palmer in the top 150. And also, you know, I do think that maybe after this, we should get Cade Otton into the top 150. Curious what you think about that, Mark. But yeah, what do you think about Bucs stuff rest of season? And we did drop Mike Evans on his hamstring injury down to 52 overall. By the way, news came out. He is not expected back until after the week 11 bye is Mike Evans.
I'm mostly worried about what this is going to do systemically to the Bucs offense. Right now, they're sitting third in pass rate over expectation in the NFL, and obviously removing Chris Godwin and Mike Evans from this offense, I think Liam Cohen is going to have a moment where he's like, maybe we should just lean into this running back room where we feel confident in playing all three of these guys. So I think it's just a massive downgrade to the entire Bucs passing offense. I think Baker, despite his amazing start, is either a drop right now or certainly a hold on your bench until Mike Evans comes back. But I would not be willing to start Baker Mayfield at this point in fantasy. And yeah, I think Jalen McMillan is the wide receiver I'd want to have here on rosters moving forward. But it's certainly going to be interesting to see how it shakes out between him and Sterling Shepard, kind of, and who will be in this Chris Godwin slot role. I think that's certainly the role we want. Hopefully Jalen McMillan gets that opportunity to be there, because I think that's the best opportunity for targets. But overall, it's just a massive downgrade to this Bucs offense. And I think people might, be overrating how Jalen McMillan and these other wide receivers can step in and maybe fill in the role, but I'm not really sure there's the role to be filled. I do think Cade Otton is startable at tight end over the next few weeks, just because he's going to be out there and probably get 6-7 targets a week. But certainly a lot of his work has come in garbage time as well. And I don't think he's necessarily a great talent, but the volume should be there.
Yeah, I mean, when things like this happen, right, a cluster of injuries, I think that teams and quarterbacks like to go to guys that they trust. They trust Cade Otton for sure. Like, absolutely, no doubt. And the other outside the box idea that I had was, if I was coaching the Bucs, I'd use Bucky Irving and Sean Tucker at running back and Rachaad White as like a pass catcher. Like, let's throw it to Rachaad White 8 times and have Bucky and Sean Tucker as our running backs. Coaches and teams don't normally do that, but if I was coaching, which I'm obviously not, but if I was coaching, I would certainly use Rachaad White more. So we're up to 98 overall on Rachaad White. I actually think this might be a low key boost for him. And yeah, I do like Cade Otton a decent amount here going forward. Oh, here's one, Daigle. Devonta Smith airball. The people are in a panic over the Devonta Smith airball. I want to be clear. Jalen Hurts only had to throw it 14 times in this entire game against the Giants. They rolled easily beyond the defense, and Saquon 28-3. So I understand people are worried about Devonta Smith. The schedule for the Eagles, we've talked about this on this show at least 5 times. I think my move to make at one point was like buy all Eagles or something like that. Their schedule is the best schedule for fantasy offenses the rest of the season easily. So if people are panicked on Devonta, I'm certainly buying Daigle. Any more thoughts on the Devonta stuff?
It's still just so condensed. I know some 14-team leaguers even tried to run Grant Calcaterra out there, but he just doesn't matter when you have A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith still out there. A.J. Brown, too, we've seen that no matter what happens with everyone else, A.J. Brown will just continue destroying. Now in his 3 full games this year, 34%, 37%, and 36% of the team's targets. It is a little bit concerning. I'm with you that I'm still starting Devonta Smith every week, and I'm not too worried about it. But if you are looking for somewhat of a signal, there are 2 games back now since Smith himself returned from injury, and he's seen a 16.5% target share and 14% target share. But I think that also just means he is clearly the second receiver, not the 1B to A.J. Brown under Kellen Moore.
Yeah. I mean, if someone's selling Devonta Smith, I'm a buyer,
Sure.
At the right price, obviously. Speaking of selling, Jack, this Najee Harris in the last 2 weeks, I mean, I've never seen this dude play like this. Never. This is like the best 2-game stretch of Najee's entire career. And people are trying to correlate this with the Russ Wilson move. It's like, oh, Russ Wilson's in. Now that opens everything up for Najee Harris because they're actually throwing the ball down the field. That's a stretch for me, man. That's a leap for me. Jack, what do you think about Najee Harris? We are at 91 overall on Najee.
Yeah, I'd agree with you there. I think we have a pretty good idea of who Najee Harris is at this point. He's the Steelers' primary early down back. Jaylen Warren is going to play the majority of pass downs, so Harris is going to get double-digit carries every week. We know Russell Wilson funneled 30% of targets to running backs last year. The majority of the running back targets are going to go to Warren, but Harris is still going to be involved in the passing game. I think if someone's willing to pay for the past 2 weeks for Harris, I definitely think he's a good sell candidate. I really don't think the expectation, though, has changed from what it was 2 weeks ago. We know he's going to get the bulk of the carries. It's nice that we finally see him score touchdowns and be efficient. But I don't think we should suddenly expect him to be this 100-yard a game rusher.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty interesting sell. I might have Najee and Jaylen Warren further, like, wider apart in our rankings, but the reason that it's like this is because Jaylen Warren has been playing a ton. I mean, he's out there a ton. Najee's just been, when Najee's out there, he gets the ball way more, and he's been way more efficient than Jaylen Warren. I cannot believe that Najee has been like lapping Jaylen Warren in efficiency, but that's what's happened so far this season. Let's keep it moving here to the Bills stuff. We got to look at the Bills with Amari Cooper. Of course, he only ran 12 routes in this game here. Mark, any takeaways from the initial Bills stuff now that we see Amari there?
Not too many takeaways. I think Dalton Kincaid and Khalil Shakir are the only Bills that I'm willing to really roster and hold at this point. I'm a little lukewarm on Keon Coleman, even though he had the big game. It was mostly on a couple of busted plays, and I do think his playing time will come at the expense of Amari Cooper quite a bit. So overall, I do think this offense is just going to be a lot more explosive, and it certainly helps Josh Allen's upside getting Amari there. We saw that just even right off the bat with him only playing less than 40% of snaps. So overall, I don't think there's too many actionable outcomes here for the Bills. I think it's kind of just a hold on Kincaid and Shakir, and you can start them with the bye week boom coming up here soon. So other than that, I think this overall Bills offense just gets a boost, and probably a boost as well to James Cook, and makes Ray Davis an even more valuable handcuff to have on your benches.
If somebody wants to buy Keon Coleman after this performance, I'd be willing to sell. That strikes me as just like a little bit fluky. Amari's going to start playing more. This narrative that's out there that Keon Coleman got loose because the defense was focused on Amari is ridiculous. Amari wasn't even on the field for Keon Coleman's big plays, as JJ Zacharyson noted. So yeah, I mean, I think no one on the Bills has gone out and grabbed it, and Amari is going to go out and grab it. I thought before the season Kincaid would go out and grab it. He just hasn't, and so I think it's a pretty big dock to all the rest of these Bills guys. Daigle, we've reached the Mazda Marv portion of the program. People are understandably, they thought they had Maserati Marv. They're understandably upset that when they try to go over 80 miles an hour, the car starts to shake. Marvin Harrison has had one good half the entire season. One good half the entire season. And the way they're using him, man, I don't know how it turns around the way they're using him. Like the underlying usage looks good because he's being targeted down the field. He's seeing targets, but he's like going out there as like MVS, like running go routes across the boundary. So I'm still a little worried on Marvin Harrison. Pretty worried on Marvin Harrison. We're down to 47 overall on him. Maybe I'm being too harsh here, Daigle. What do you think about Marvin Harrison right now?
I don't think you are. I just wish I had a better explanatory for everyone of what's going on. He was the overall wide receiver 1 in week 2. Beyond that, his next closest finish is wide receiver 20. And that's the only time he's been a top 24 wide receiver this year. He's basically been just a flex option or matchup-based streamer. And it's concerning. I know Jonathan Gannon came out after the game and mentioned that Harrison didn't do well because he was double coveraged a lot of the time. I'm not sure if that's true or not, but I do know it's obviously been a struggle for fantasy. So someone that we continue pushing down. And again, I wish I had a better explanation for you. Kyler has had lackluster games as well. OC, offensive coordinator Drew Petzing, has continued to build around James Conner more than anything. So that's a little bit of a signal that they want to be like a running offense similar to the Lions, except that their efficiency games are not the same as Detroit's either. So unless Jack or Mark have another thought, I think Harrison Jr. just continues to be closer to a wide receiver 2 or 3.
I don't want to hear it from this dude. Oh, Marvin Harrison's getting double teamed. Buddy, it's your job to make sure that he's in a spot where they can't double team. Double teams have not stopped Malik Neighbors or AJ Brown or all these other guys that get double teamed constantly. It's a preposterous thing to say. Have out some personal responsibility, Drew Petzing. You're not going to be getting my presidential vote with that kind of attitude.
I do think there's just a massive gap between his on-field real football value and his fantasy football value at this point. Like, I don't think Marvin Harrison Jr. is a bust or a bad wide receiver or anything. I just don't think his role and usage is great for fantasy, and certainly not, at the end of round 1 or early round 2 as we were drafting him. So I think some good weeks will happen because I still think he's a great player, but certainly for fantasy football, his usage is not ideal.
All right, let's go to this Jameson Williams. I can't believe Jameson Williams got suspended, but here we are. It's only 2 games, so I don't think there's a lot of fallout here, Jack, for people to make moves off of. We did dock Jameson Williams down to 69 overall on his 2-game suspension. The other concern I thought for Jameson Williams was Tim Patrick's balling, man. I mean, Tim Patrick's playing well, and that's not great for Jameson generally, and it's not great if Tim Patrick goes out and plays really well here while Jameson is out. Either they already have enough problems getting targets to everyone. We're down to 79 overall on Sam Laporta. Anyways, Jack, any Lions thoughts here for people to use while Jameson is suspended for 2 games?
Yeah, I mean, I can totally believe Jameson Williams got suspended. Now, if you asked me who the most likely player to get suspended, he would have been near the top of the list. Just on brand so far for his career. I feel like it's always something with him.
I know, but he's not jacked. I assume it's the guy. It's like, but that's a bad take because like Will Fuller got busted and Jameson Williams got busted. It's these like skinny, fast guys that keep getting busted and screwing me. Yeah.
But regardless, I mean, if it's ever going to happen for Sam Laporta, it's got to be now. He has a 9.7% target share on the season. I think you can still trot him out in fantasy these next 2 weeks and hope that he gets targets without JMO, but it has undeniably just been really bad so far this year. On the Tim Patrick stuff, I mean, he's been good. He hasn't earned a ton of volume. He hasn't had a single game above an 11% target share yet. That should change without Jameson Williams. But, I mean, in this same offense, like Josh Reynolds, it was not super fantasy relevant last year. Like, I think Tim Patrick's a desperation play in fantasy these next 2 weeks, but he's not someone I'd feel really good about trotting out there. Dan Campbell, right before we hopped on here, had a strange quote where he was hyping up Allen Robinson as the guy who's gonna fill in. So we'll see what the usage breakdown looks like. But I do expect Patrick to be wide receiver 2 here. I'm just not sure it's like an auto smash for fantasy.
I saw that. I didn't actually see the whole quote or anything. Is he losing his mind? Did he mean to say Tim Patrick and he actually said Allen Robinson? But anyways, we'll look at that and see what we can come up with for Lion stuff going forward. I have not seen it on Sam Laporta. Through 7 weeks, they have not made one intention other than that flea flicker to get Sam Laporta the ball. So, yeah, just have not seen it, period. It's just like a total afterthought in the offense. Last one here before we get to listener questions, Mark, the David Njoku stuff. you know, I'm so thrilled to have David Njoku in some spots. Njoku was always, for me, in these Cleveland setups with Deshaun Watson, it was always like, close my eyes and bet on one of the most athletic players in the entire league that we know the team likes. Down the stretch last year, David Njoku was like the key to a bunch of my good best ball teams because their whole offense was get the ball to David Njoku, like first read, immediate, get it out quick, get into Njoku, let him use his athletic ability. And that was just a total printing press. If Jameis is the starter, you can make a case that David Njoku is like top 3 easy. And even with DTR, he's probably top 5 for me too. So I'm excited about Njoku here. Any thoughts on that, Mark, and Brown's thoughts?
For sure. I think it's kind of almost like a Colts late scenario where when Joe Flacco is the starter there, we love the fantasy options. When Anthony Richardson is the starter, it hurts their value quite a bit. And we know that Jameis Winston is just an absolutely amazing quarterback asset to have for our fantasy assets. So I love David Njoku when Jameis Winston is in there. I think you could easily say he's the tight end 2 in fantasy, just behind Brock Bowers when Jameis Winston is the starter. I'm much less excited if DTR gets starts, which I think he will down the stretch just with the Browns in tank mode here. So I think, as long as Jameis is the starter, it's an easy plug and play, wheels up for David Njoku. When DTR is in there, I think it's going to be a bit more volatile, but I certainly think David Njoku will probably give him a 25 to 30% target share moving forward, which is just crazy. We don't really do that for many other tight ends. I think Brock Bowers and Trey McBride are the only other tight ends we have at that level at this point. So certainly some concerns around the Browns' efficiency on offense, but the volume is going to be there for Njoku, and we know the athleticism is there as well. So yeah, it's just a smash for him with Jameis.
I've seen DTR. I played DTR in the preseason a couple times. It's not ideal, right? Like I might actually prefer Watson out there for DTR for Njoku over DTR, but clearly Jameis is just the nuts. Yeah. All right. Let's get to some of your listener questions. Appreciate the questions from everyone. This is a good one for you, Daigle. Are you still dropping Patrick Mahomes for Drake May in one quarterback leagues after the DeAndre Hopkins trade?
I believe so. And the point of Mahomes being dropped in one quarterback leagues, something we've had a discussion now to get him on the drop list for the last month. And it finally came to fruition, of course, 12 hours before the team trades for DeAndre Hopkins, is that, especially this year, production in one quarterback leagues is so very easily replaceable. And Mahomes, in my opinion, even with this trade, the entire construction of the offense doesn't necessarily change. It's about finding the ceiling of a quarterback weekly, and we can find that over Mahomes weekly, in my opinion.
Yeah. My concern, if I was starting one of these guys, Mahomes or Drake May or whatever, it would be on a streaming basis, right? Hopefully you're in a league where you can stream quarterback. And these next few weeks for Drake May aren't great. Jets, at Titans, at Bears, not ideal for Drake May. And so that might be one reason I hold on to Mahomes over him for now. But either way, I want to be streaming. I don't want to be locked on to any of these quarterbacks that we have here in the back of the top 150. All right. Stovewood says, I'm sitting at 6-1 and 7-0 in my leagues. Shout out to you, Stovewood. He says, should I be trying to target one of these guys on IR, but we coming back in the playoffs? McCaffrey, Collins, give up Achane for CMC. Jack, this is along the lines of what we already talked about on CMC. I like acquiring CMC in the spots that we talked about before. Nico is one. Like I said, I have not seen any updates on him at all. He is eligible to come back week 10 here. But yeah, thoughts on trading for him and CMC if you have good teams?
Yeah, I do like trading for CMC, as mentioned before. Achane seems a little bit expensive to me. I feel like that's around the range of what I would call a fair trade for a 6-1 team. Nico Collins, I definitely think it makes sense to trade for if you're 7-0 or 6-1. We don't know exactly when he'll be back. But I think everyone expects him to be back by the fantasy playoffs, and he is a top 5 receiver in fantasy football easily when he's healthy. So if someone's willing to sell you him for cheap right now, needing immediate production, that's definitely one I'd be interested in.
I mean, Nico Collins was on his way to being fantasy's #1 wide receiver this season. He was on his way. So I like taking shots on him for sure. It would have to be a really bad hamstring pull, really bad for him to not be back sometime in the next 2, 3, 4 weeks. From Pool 2020, Mark says, Brian Thomas Jr. has been so good but has a brutal playoff schedule. I better bring up this schedule. He says it's so brutal. I need to see this. He says, should I look to sell high on Brian Thomas Jr.? So it is Jets in week 15, at Raiders in week 16, home versus Titans in week 17. Those look like pretty good spots to me. Obviously, Jets isn't ideal, but Raiders and Titans seem reasonably fine here. Mark, what do you think about Brian Thomas Jr.? Certainly super hot right now.
Love Brian Thomas Jr., but I do think he is somewhat of an appropriate sell high, just with Evan Ingram coming back for this Jaguars offense. There's still, quite a bit of dysfunction there, even though they beat the Patriots over in London this week. I don't think just after one win that all that dysfunction can go out the window. It looks like Christian Kirk is probably going to stay in Jacksonville at this point and not be traded as well. So, with Brian Thomas, it looks like he'll probably get low 20 target shares, which is, maybe 6, 7, 8 targets a game there. So certainly he's been explosive and an amazing receiver to have. He's kind of someone I think that you could trade right now for like CMC if you have a winning team and want to plan more for the playoff run. So I think he's a decent sell high at this point, but I'm also perfectly fine holding him just because he's been amazing. And I do think there is upside in this Jags offense still, given how poorly their defense has played.
I mean, if you want to sell Brian Thomas, that's fine. Just make sure you're getting the right value. We have him 36 overall. We have him right around Garrett Wilson and DK Metcalf. Don't be selling Brian Thomas like he's some rookie who's going to tank. Dude is too good. Make sure you're getting appropriate value for Brian Thomas if you want to sell him. Agobavich says, is Deandre Swift a sell high given his impressive pass performance, but rough upcoming schedule, Daigle? So the Bears have had a very soft schedule leading up to their bye. They have a reasonable schedule the next 2 games, and then it's going to start to get much, much tougher here on Deandre Swift. What do you think about selling on him?
I am content with Swift. If you can find someone that wants to sell or buy extremely high, that's okay. But beyond that, even the upcoming schedule you mentioned, Commanders, Cardinals, Patriots, yes, but then the Packers, who we always try to attack up front. So I don't mind keeping Swift. He now has 21 touches in 3 consecutive games against the soft schedule. Yeah, I'm content.
Yeah, home game against the Lions and home game against the Seahawks in weeks 16 and 17 for Deandre Swift. I kind of think he's a hold here also. All right, we covered that. We covered that. We have a Fat Keenan question, Jack. A Dunze or Fat Keenan rest of season. Who would you rather roster if you're 1-6 and desperate to go on a winning streak? Listen, first of all, shout out to you, welterweight. You're 1-6. You're still out here grinding it to a nub. I respect it, man. If I was 1-6, I would already just be neck deep in the DFS streets. It's like it's over, man. I'd just be grinding DFS. But anyways, shout out to you. What do you think here, Jack? A Dunze or Fat Keenan rest of season?
Yeah, I would go with Adunze between those two. Since that week 1 game for Keenan Allen where he had a 38% target share, he's been 13%, 21%, 17% target shares. Those are good target shares. That's better than what Odunze has been getting, but he hasn't shown a ton of ability to get down the field, which makes sense given his age. And then Odunze also has the narrative of the post-bye rookie bump. He kind of has 2 post-bye rookie bumps if you want to factor in that maybe Caleb Williams picked something up over the bye week, and Caleb also looked a lot better in his 2 games going into the bye. So I would take Adunze over Keenan Allen.
Yeah, that's how we have it in the rankings. We have Adunze 66, Keenan 75, DJ Moore 45 overall right now. All right, Mark, let's go to the trade calculator here for this one. Why don't you read this while I go to the trade calculator here?
Yeah, the question is thoughts on sending Marvin Harrison Jr. and Tank Bigsby for Tyron Tracy and Nico Collins. So Marv Harrison Jr. And Tank Bigsby on one side, and then Tyron Tracy and Nico Collins on the other side.
I think this was asked in my Discord yesterday as well, and I said I would take the Tracy and Nico side.
In the trade calculator, we have it favoring the Collins and Tracy side by about 10% here.
Yeah,
Mark, what do you think about this deal?
I certainly like the Collins and Tracy side if you're in a good position record-wise and are more setting yourself up for the playoffs. Those are the 2 players I'd much rather have. while Tank Bigsby has won the RB job right now in Jacksonville, it does seem like ETN will continue to mix in there, and Tank Bigsby has just been an absolute zero in the passing game. So he really needs touchdowns to have fantasy relevance. And then, we kind of hit on Marvin Harrison Jr.'s profile. He's going to be more boom bust. So I definitely prefer the Collins and Tracy side, assuming, that this team isn't sub 500.
Yeah. That's the move, Daigle. You can get a second opinion. They ask you in Discord, and then they come back for the rest of season top 150 question here. Yeah. The other, two problems with Marvin Harrison, the stuff this side of the Marvin Harrison trade, already talked about concerns on Marvin Harrison, and then Tank Bigsby just been a stone zero in the pass game. I mean, absolute stone zero in the pass game. So two concerns there, and obviously Nico and Tracy, two high upside guys. All right. Let me tech lord here back to the rankings, and we will do our one move to make. I believe Mark got to start last time. Let's go the other way this time. Jack, if you are prepared for your one move to make ahead of week 8.
Yeah, I'm going to say sell Tank Bigsby. He just in London went for 26 carries, 118 yards, and 2 touchdowns. But Travis Etienne is day to day. He might be back this week. The initial reporting on the injury was that he'd be week to week with the hamstring. It appears it's not that bad, and he could play this week, which could eat into Bigsby's carry share. They don't trust Bigsby at all, like we just said in the passing game. He had a season high 5% target share in week 7. That is still absolutely terrible. It's been 7 weeks, and Tank Bigsby has 1 catch this entire season. And then looking at their schedule, starting on December 8th, it gets easier. They play the Titans twice. They play the Raiders. And then if your league, for some reason, goes to week 18, they get the Colts in week 18. But their next few games, they get the Packers, the Eagles, the Vikings, the Lions, and the Texans. That's just a brutal stretch for a running back who is dependent on being in positive game script. So I'm going to say, if anyone is believing that Bigsby is suddenly the RB1 in Jacksonville, and that ETN is going to fade into oblivion, I would say sell Tank Bigsby.
Yeah, I like that one. And I would add that I think when Travis Etienne comes back, he will have a share of the base work, which hurts Tank Bigsby. And then, the pass down work, which, Bigsby wasn't getting anyways. So it's like there's no good outcomes here for Tank Bigsby, assuming that Travis Etienne does get back relatively soon from his hamstring strain. Daigle, your one move to make ahead of week 8.
I do like the sell Keon Coleman high call, but I'll go a little bit spicier than that for everyone, because I think you should gauge the market on Malik Neighbors. The first game this week without Andrew Thomas, and only a 1-game sample, but Daniel Jones was under pressure on 47% of his dropbacks. And that's important to note because on the entire year, Daniel Jones, only Aiden O'Connell, Tyler Huntley, and Bo Nix have averaged fewer yards per attempt when under pressure. Prior to returning from his concussion, Malik Neighbors led the entire league, every player, Cooper Kupp included, and target share. And so what does it look like if we now get a more inefficient passing offense from Daniel Jones, who they already had to come out and defend and say he's our quarterback, which usually means he's only your quarterback for a couple more games because his leash is shorter than ever. So I am worried that even a slight regression for Neighbors could lead to being a low-end wide receiver 1, fringe wide receiver 1. And if that's the case, I think right now you can get whatever the hell you want for him in fantasy football. So I'm at least seeing what he'll bring back, especially if I'm 2 and 5 or 3 or 4.
Yeah, similar to the thought that I had on Brian Thomas. Like, I don't want to be selling Malik Neighbors, but if I do, I better be getting appropriate value. We have him 8th overall. Like, so you should be getting a haul if you're selling Malik Neighbors. I think that's what Daigle is referring to there. Mark, rest of season top 150.
I'm going to go with sell Kareem Hunt. This is mostly a move for teams that are pacing well and look like they have the playoffs. I just think Hunt's value is going to evaporate come fantasy playoff time. In the last couple of weeks, he's had 27 and 22 carries and 3 combined touchdowns for the Chiefs while averaging under 4 yards a carry. So he's just been getting amazing volume. Clyde Edwards-Helaire was inactive this past week, but he is activated off IR, so he could potentially mix in a little bit more. And then Isaiah Pacheco, this is also an Isaiah Pacheco getting healthier scenario, and there really hasn't been much reporting on him, and I think people are searching now and think Hunt is an amazing play for the rest of the year potentially. But the initial timeline on Isaiah Pacheco was 6 to 8 weeks, and he was injured in week 2, so that would now put him between weeks 8 and 10 to potentially come back, even if it's on the later end of that time frame and he comes back like week 12 again. I think Hunt's value is just going to be sapped come fantasy playoffs time. So I think just after these 2 amazing games is a good time to sell high. If you need wins the next couple weeks, I could understand holding on to Hunt at this point, but I just think his value is as high as it's going to get. And, if we get a report on Pacheco that he's pacing to come back in the next 2 or 3 weeks, Hunt's value is going to tank. So I'd rather just sell high now.
On Isaiah Pacheco's Instagram, if you guys are grinding Instagram, which I know all you perverts are, there is a video Isaiah Pacheco put out of him walking on a treadmill. So yeah, I think the 6 to 8 weeks thing was kind of fluid. We'll see what happens. I thought that was like a loose 6 to 8 weeks. If Pacheco's out for the year, I still like Kareem Hunt. But yeah, based on the Instagram and what the original timeline was, if Pacheco comes back, it's obviously big problems for Kareem Hunt. All right. My move to make ahead of week 8 is going to be, you know what? I'm going to go. I like sell Najee Harris. I like buy Devonta Smith, but I'm going to officially go with sell Kyren Williams. Now, Kyren Williams has a long injury history and is averaging 21.6 touches per game. We have Kyren Williams 12th overall in the rankings, which I actually think is right. Now, in the fantasy playoffs, Rams have to play at San Francisco and at the Jets. Not ideal. We also have the Trent Green report from the broadcast this week about Blake Corum, which he said the intention that the Rams have is 2 series for Kyren, 1 series for Corum. That didn't happen last week, but maybe it happens going forward. And then if you, like, we have him 12th overall. If you can get top 10 value for Kyren Williams, like CeeDee Lamb or maybe Tyreek plus Jacobs or something like that, I'm certainly in. I think one of the other big things about what's going on with Kyren is that he has scored a touchdown in every single game this year. 8 touchdowns of them overall. Like, fantasy football, people in their heads get so weighted towards touchdowns. And I agree, scoring touchdowns is a skill. The Rams have only thrown for 3 touchdowns. That rate is just completely out of whack here. You're getting Cooper Kupp back. Puka Nacua is back in practice. I understand Cooper Kupp could be traded, but still, I think we'll see more throwing touchdowns going forward here. And Kyren also only has 15 targets in 6 games. Rams running back throw rate has been outrageously low. So I think it's a little bit more fragile on Kyren than people think right now. Still love him in DFS, obviously. But I think long-term, if I can get a haul for Kyren Williams, I'm in. All right. That is going to do it for this rest of season top 150 rankings show. Reminder, if you are into the NBA, got to check out what Dink and his team are doing. Head to the NBA tab for DFS, projections, props, etc. For Daigle, for Jack, for Mark, I am Adam. Good luck, everybody.